Would you risk your life to save others? One wrong step and you're dead. Stay silent and everyone you love will be destroyed. Would you have the courage to act? Well, this was the choice facing a young Jewish woman, Esther, Queen of Persia, and her next move would determine who lived and who died.
Long ago, in the magnificent kingdom of Persia, there ruled a powerful king named Xerxes. His empire stretched across 127 provinces, from the deserts of India to the far reaches of Ethiopia, encompassing countless peoples, cities, and treasures. King Xerxes was a man of great wealth and influence, and he spared no expense to display the splendor of his reign. In the 3rd year of his reign, King Xerxes decided to throw the biggest party anyone had ever seen. For 180 days, he displayed the wealth and splendor of his kingdom to all the nobles and officials. And when that wasn't enough, he threw another feast that lasted 7 whole days for everyone in the capital city of Shushan. The royal garden was draped in white, green, and blue linen curtains, fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rings, supported by marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver upon floors of red, blue, white, and black marble, and the guests drank wine from golden goblets, each one unique. The king was generous and told everyone to drink as much as they wanted. At the same time, Queen Vashti held her own banquet for the women in the royal palace, a private display of beauty and luxury separate from the king's grand spectacle. On the 7th day of the feast, when King Xerxes was feeling very merry from wine, he commanded his 7 servants to bring Queen Vashti before him. He wanted to display her beauty to all his guests, for she was lovely to look at. The queen was to wear her royal crown, but Queen Vashti refused to come. The king was furious. His anger burned inside him like a fire. He consulted with his wise advisors about what to do. They told him, "Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but all the nobles and peoples throughout the empire. When women hear what the queen has done, they will look down on their husbands. There will be no end of disrespect and discord." So the king issued a royal decree. Queen Vashti would never again enter the presence of King Xerxes, and the king would give her royal position to someone better than she. The decree was written into the laws of Persia and Media, which could never be changed. After the king's anger had cooled, he began to remember Vashti and what she had done. His attendants suggested a plan. Let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province to bring these young women to the harem in Shushan. Then let the young woman who pleases the king become queen instead of Vashti. The king liked this idea, and so the search began throughout the entire Persian Empire. Now, in the city of Shushan, there lived a Jewish man named Mordecai. He was from the tribe of Benjamin, and his family had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon many years before. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had raised as his own daughter after her parents died. Hadassah was also called Esther, and she was lovely in form and features. When the king's order was announced, many young women were brought to the palace in Shushan, and Esther was among them. She was taken to the palace and placed under the care of Hegai, who was in charge of the harem. Hegai had an important job. He oversaw all the young women who were brought to the palace and prepared them to meet the king. Esther immediately won Heggai's favor. He quickly provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned 7 female attendants to her from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. But Esther had a secret. Mordecai had instructed her not to reveal her nationality or family background. Every day, Mordecai walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was doing and what was happening to her. For 12 months, each young woman underwent beauty treatments, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. This was the required time of preparation before she could go to the king. When her turn finally came to go to King Xerxes, each young woman could take whatever she wanted from the harem to the palace with her: jewelry, fine clothes, perfumes, anything she thought might please the king. But there was something every young woman needed to know. After spending the evening with the king, she would be taken to a second harem, overseen by another official named Shashgaz, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king again unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. Most of these young women would spend the rest of their lives waiting for a summons that would never come. So when Esther's turn came, she asked nothing except what Heggai suggested. She won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was humble, gracious, and kind. In the 7th year of King Xerxes, in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, Esther was taken to the king in the royal palace. The king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women. She won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. He set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. The king gave a great banquet in Esther's honor, proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces, and distributed gifts with royal generosity. But still, even as queen, Esther kept her Jewish identity a secret, just as Mordecai had told her to do.
During this time, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, he overheard 2 of the king's officers who guarded the entrance plotting to assassinate King Xerxes. They were angry with the king and planned to kill him. When Mordecai found out about it, he immediately told Queen Esther, and she reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. The report was investigated and found to be true, and the 2 officers were hanged on a gallows. All of this was recorded in the Book of the Annals in the presence of the king. Mordecai had saved the king's life, but at the time no reward was given to him. Sometime later, King Xerxes honored a man named Haman, elevating him above all the other nobles. The king commanded that all the royal officials at the gate must kneel down and honor Haman. But Mordecai refused to kneel or show him honor. Day after day, the other officials asked Mordecai why he disobeyed the king's command. He told them he was a Jew. When they reported this to Haman, he was filled with rage. But having learned who Mordecai's people were, Haman decided that killing Mordecai alone was not enough. He looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, all the Jews throughout the entire kingdom of Xerxes. Haman cast lots, called Pur, to select a day for the destruction of the Jews. The lot fell on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman went to King Xerxes with a sinister proposal. "There is a certain people scattered among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom," he said. "Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury."
That was an amount worth millions and millions of dollars, roughly equivalent to 2/3 of the entire annual income of the Persian Empire. The king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman. "Keep your money," the king said, "and do with the people as you please." On the 13th day of the first month, Haman summoned the king's secretaries. They wrote out all of Haman's orders to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month. The decree was written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his ring. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy all Jews. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was bewildered and filled with confusion and fear.
When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. Throughout every province where the king's edict had gone, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. When Esther's attendants told her about Mordecai, she was deeply distressed. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther sent a messenger to find out what was troubling Mordecai. Mordecai told him everything that had happened and about the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the decree and urged the messenger to show it to Esther. He asked her to go to the king and beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. The messenger returned and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther sent this reply back to Mordecai: "All the king's officials and the people know that any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned will be put to death. The only exception is if the king extends the gold scepter, sparing their life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king." Esther faced an impossible choice. If she went to the king uninvited, she could be executed. But if she did nothing, her entire people would be destroyed. What would she do? When Mordecai received Esther's message, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" These words pierced Esther's heart. She realized that perhaps this was exactly why she had become queen, not for comfort or glory, but to save her people in their darkest hour. Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace, in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. Esther's heart must have been pounding. One wrong move, one moment of displeasure from the king, and she would die. But she stood there with courage and dignity. When the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor. He extended the gold scepter that was in his hand toward Esther. She approached and touched the tip of the scepter. "What is it, Queen Esther?" the king asked. "What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you." Esther took a breath, but she didn't blurt out her request immediately. With wisdom and strategy, she said, "If it pleases the king, "Let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." The king was pleased and agreed. At the first banquet, the king again asked Esther, "What is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." But again, Esther wisely delayed. "My petition and my request is this: if the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." Haman left the banquet that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and noticed that Mordecai neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage. Yet he restrained himself and went home. When he got home, he sent for his wife Zeresh and his friends. Haman boasted to his wife and friends about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him. "And that's not all," he added. "I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow." But then his face darkened. "But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate." His wife and friends suggested, "Have a gallows built 75 feet high and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself." This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the gallows built. That night the king could not sleep. He ordered the Book of the Annals, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. There it was found recorded how Mordecai had exposed the plot of the two officers who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. "What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this?" the king asked. "Nothing has been done for him," his attendants answered. Just then Haman entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had built. "Who is in the court?" the king asked. "Haman is standing in the court," they replied. "Bring him in," the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Haman thought to himself, "Who is there that the king would rather honor than me?" His heart swelled with pride, so he answered the king with an elaborate plan. "For the man the king delights to honor, let them bring a royal robe the king himself has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" Haman could already picture himself in those royal robes, sitting high on that royal horse, with everyone bowing before him. "Go at once," the king commanded. "Get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended." Haman was shocked and humiliated. His heart sank. But he had no choice. He had to honor the very man he hated most. So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home, his head covered in grief and humiliation. Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His wife and his wise advisers said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." Their words sent a chill through Haman. The Jews, there was something about these people. Throughout history, those who tried to destroy them had failed. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. At the second banquet, the king again asked Queen Esther,
"What is your petition, Queen Esther? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." This time, Esther was ready. With courage and emotion, she answered, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." King Xerxes was stunned. Who is he? Where is he, the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther pointed directly at him, an adversary and enemy, this vile Haman. Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden, Haman had fallen on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. This was the sign that his fate was sealed. One of the attendants said, "A gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told the king how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. But there was still a problem. The original decree to destroy the Jews was still in effect, and according to Persian law, no decree written in the king's name and sealed with his ring could be revoked. Esther pleaded with the king again, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman. The king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose. Then King Xerxes told her and Mordecai, "Write another decree in the king's name on behalf of the Jews as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring." So a new decree was written, giving the Jews the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force that might attack them. The city of Shushan erupted in celebration. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and city, wherever the king's edict went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. On the 13th day of Adar, the day Haman had chosen for their destruction, the Jews defended themselves and defeated their enemies. In Shushan alone, 500 men, including Haman's 10 sons, were killed. They took no plunder, fighting only for survival. Esther asked for one more day of defense in Shushan, and the king granted it. From that day on, the Jews celebrated the 14th and 15th of Adar as days of joy, feasting, and giving gifts to one another.
This celebration became known as Purim, named after the lot that Haman had cast to choose the day of destruction. For what Haman had intended for evil, God had turned to good.
Now here's what makes Esther's story so profound, and what we can learn from it. Notice that God's name is never mentioned once in the entire Book of Esther. Not once. There are no miracles, no parting seas, no fire from heaven, no angels appearing. Yet this is one of the most powerful demonstrations of God's providence in all of Scripture. God was working through every coincidence in the story. Esther becoming queen, Mordecai overhearing the plot, the king's sleepless night, the timing of the banquets, and all of these worked together for good. Sometimes God's most powerful work happens in the invisible spaces, in the things we can't see. Also, think about this. Esther didn't seek to be queen. She was taken to the palace as part of the king's search, placed in circumstances beyond her control. She had to hide who she was. She lived in a pagan palace, married to a king who had no idea about her faith or her people. Many of us feel like we're in situations we didn't plan for, surrounded by people who don't share our values, in positions we never imagined. But Esther shows us that God can use even the most unexpected circumstances for His greatest purposes. Each of us has been placed where we are for a reason. We may not be queens or kings, but we each have a sphere of influence and moments when we must choose to act. Here's another truth. Esther had to risk her privilege to save others. She could have stayed silent. As queen, she had wealth, safety, and comfort. Mordecai even warned her, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape." Esther had to realize that her position wasn't just for her benefit, it was for the benefit of those who had no voice. When we have privilege, influence, or access that others don't, we have a responsibility to use it for those who are powerless. And consider the wisdom in Esther's approach. She didn't burst into the king's presence with demands. She didn't react emotionally. She fasted, she prayed, and planned carefully. She invited the king to not one, but 2 banquets. She created the right moment, the right atmosphere. Sometimes courage isn't about being loud or aggressive. It's about being strategic, patient, and wise. Timing matters. But perhaps the most uncomfortable truth in this story is this: Esther had no guarantee of success. "If I perish, she said. She accepted the possibility of death. In our culture, we want guaranteed outcomes before we take risks. We want to know everything will work out. But faith often means stepping forward when the outcome is uncertain, when failure is possible, when death is even likely. And here's what's haunting. Mordecai told Esther, "If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish." In other words, God's purposes will be fulfilled with or without you. The question is, will you be part of the deliverance, or will you miss your moment? There are moments in history, moments in our lives when we're called to act. If we don't, God will find another way, but we'll lose the opportunity to be part of something greater than ourselves. The Book of Esther doesn't give us easy answers or simple formulas. It shows us a complex world where good people make hard choices, where evil plots and schemes, where God works in hidden ways, and where ordinary people with deep flaws become instruments of salvation. And that sometimes the most unlikely person, an orphan, an exile, someone who feels powerless, can be exactly who the world needs for such a time as this.
Thank you so much for watching this story of courage, faith, and divine providence. If this story of Queen Esther inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing Bible stories. Share this video with someone who needs encouragement to be brave and stand up for what's right. Remember, you might be exactly where you are for such a time as this. Until next time, may you have the courage of Esther.